Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a prophecy that's honestly fascinated and, let's be real, freaked out people for centuries. We're going to use the biblical books of Revelation and Daniel as our roadmap to break down these really compelling figures, the Antichrist and the false prophet.
All right, so the big question right off the bat, who are these two? What's their deal? We're going to dive straight into the book of Revelation, because that's where we first meet these two individuals who are prophesied to just completely take over the world stage.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get to know the two main players. Then we'll look at the huge global system they put together. And finally, and this is super interesting, we're going to travel way back in time to an ancient prophecy that might just tell us exactly where they come from.
All right, part one. So, Revelation kicks things off by introducing these two incredibly powerful figures. Now, they're called beasts, but we're not talking about literal monsters here. It's all symbolic, and their origins actually tell us a ton about who they are and what they represent.
And look at this, you've got a really clear contrast. On one hand, you have the Antichrist, who comes up out of the sea. We'll get to what that means in a second, but think global. Then you have the false prophet, rising from the earth, and our source material suggests this points to a purely human, a man-made origin, completely separate from anything divine.
And yeah, just to be super clear, when the text says sea, it's not talking about the Atlantic or Pacific. It's a metaphor. In these prophetic writings, the sea or waters almost always represents the massive, chaotic ocean of humanity, all the peoples, nations, and different languages. This is a huge clue that the Antichrist power base is going to be totally global.
Okay, so now that we have a sense of who they are, let's talk about what they do, because that's the real kicker. Together, their goal is to build this massive new world system, actually two interconnected systems, both designed for one thing: absolute global control.
And you can see their strategy is basically a 1-2 punch. First up, the false prophet gets to work building a global religion. He's performing all these signs and wonders, these incredible miracles, all to get the entire world to worship the Antichrist. Then, at the same time, he rolls out a brand new global economic system, one where you need a special mark for literally every single transaction. And that brings us to the very heart of this new global economy. The entire system of control hinges on this one single and, let's face it, infamous number that I'm sure you've all heard of.
Yep, 666. But in this prophecy, it's not just some spooky symbol. It is the literal key to the whole financial system. If you don't have it, you can't buy food, you can't sell your car, you can't do anything. You're completely locked out of the economy.
But here's the thing. It's not just some arbitrary number they picked out of a hat. The text is really specific. It says it's the number of a man. The idea is that the letters in the Antichrist's actual name, when you calculate them using their Greek numerical values, will literally add up to 666.
So this mark, whether it's his name or that number, becomes the universal pass for all commerce. And this is where this ancient text suddenly feels incredibly current, right? I mean, for the first time in human history, the technology for something like this actually exists. Think about a global cashless society, biometric IDs, implantable tech. The infrastructure is pretty much already here.
So we've seen what this whole system is supposed to look like. But the really mind-blowing part is that these prophecies might also tell us where this leader comes from. And to find that answer, we have to rewind the clock way back, more than 600 years before Revelation was even written, to the prophecies of a man named Daniel. So way back around 600 BC, the prophet Daniel has this vision that basically lays out a timeline of world history. It predicts the rise and fall of 4 massive empires that would dominate the world: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and, you guessed it, the fourth and final one, the Roman Empire.
And it's that last empire, Rome, that our source material points to as the key, the absolute crucial piece of the puzzle for figuring out the Antichrist political and geographical origin. The whole prophecy actually comes from a king's wild dream about a giant statue. Each part of the statue, made of a different metal, represented one of those empires. But the really fascinating part, the part that points to the future, is the feet. They weren't solid metal. They were a weird, brittle mixture of iron and clay, hinting at a final, kind of shaky version of that last empire. So, what's the deal with these feet made of iron and clay? Well, the interpretation isn't that it's a fifth world empire. Instead, it's seen as a modern-day revival, a confederation of nations that emerges from the same geographical territory as the old Roman Empire. We're basically talking about Europe and the Mediterranean region.
And this, right here, is the final piece of the puzzle. The prophecy in Daniel says that from this revived confederation, 10 leaders, 10 kings will emerge. But then an 11th leader will rise up, someone different and more powerful, and he will take down 3 of the original 10. According to this interpretation, that man is the Antichrist.
So, let's just recap. We've followed this incredible prophetic thread all the way from ancient Babylon through the great empires right up to a future leader emerging from a revived European confederation. It really leaves you with a pretty big question, doesn't it? If these ancient texts really are a kind of roadmap for the future, what does that mean for the world we're all living in right now?